Hello everyone, my name is Gibbons. I'm an assistant professor at the Institute for Systems Biology, and I'm here to tell you about what systems biology is and why you should care about it. So the history of biology as a field has generally been what you'd call reductionist. So we've kind of zoomed in on the little tiny pieces of biology, like a single protein or a single gene, and we've kind of parsed it and studied it in isolation to understand how biology works from the ground up. And we learned a ton doing this. All of 20th century biology, all the huge breakthroughs that have been made about discovering the structure of DNA and so on, has been essentially using this approach. However, as we gain more and more knowledge and as we collect more and more data, we have to start to begin to put these pieces back together again to understand how the whole organism works. And it turns out that you can't just take out a single protein from the entire creature and understand how it behaves in the context of the rest of the organism. It just doesn't work that way. Things behave differently when you have them embedded in these complex networks. More is different, so to speak. So this is, I guess, the purview of systems biology or complex systems theory, is understanding how the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. An example you might be familiar with is a flock of starlings, right? You see these flocks of birds kind of moving through the sky in these beautiful wavy patterns. But if I plucked one of those starlings out of that flock into my lab and I was studying it, trying to understand these emergent phenomena, these wavy patterns in the sky, just by looking at a single bird, I'd be very hard pressed to actually understand how these clouds work. You can't just take something out one at a time and understand how this large emergent phenomenon works. Another example is temperature, right? It doesn't make sense to define a temperature for a single atom zipping around in a box, for example. But once you have hundreds of millions of atoms moving around and have an average velocity to all those little particles, suddenly you get this emergent property that we call temperature, right? This temperature sort of emerges as a behavior from a large ensemble of interacting pieces. And the final example I'll give you is a car, right? Imagine you had all the pieces of a car deconstructed and put out in front of you on the ground, and you were an alien coming to Earth, and you were asked, what does this thing do? And you just had the individual pieces at one at a time, looking at them, a spark plug or a wheel, and you might not quite understand the entire function of a car by just looking at individual parts. But if they were assembled into the car itself, it would be very trivial to understand what a car was doing by just observing its behavior. You could see it's rolling down the road, it's carrying people, and that is a sort of emergent function, a designed function in this case by humans, but not necessarily predictive from the individual parts. So why the need for systems biology in general? Like, why is biology complex? Why is the whole greater than the sum of the parts in biology? Well, I think it's a combination of different things. So the emergence of life on Earth and what distinguishes life from the inorganic is essentially that life marries two different things. It combines action, the ability to carry out something like metabolism, with memory. It can remember its past. It doesn't have to start all over again. Like volcanoes, they have action as well, but they behave about the same as they behaved 100 million years ago, right? But volcanoes aren't learning. They aren't changing. They aren't adapting to do new things. Whereas biology, that is a trivial thing. It's doing it all the time. It's like playing a video game, right? So in the old days, the old video games at the arcade, you play them. If you lose, you get set back to the beginning. There's no saving your spot, right? So you were limited in your design of these games. You couldn't make them too complex or too long because it would be impossible to win them. But as soon as you were able to save at certain points in a game, you could build these elaborate games that went on for a very long time. And essentially, life has been playing this kind of video game over 3-4 billion years. It's been learning and adapting to succeed, thrive, give rise to new progeny in varying environments around the planet. And the way it's done this is to have a memory, right? It can remember its past. It learns how to do something, it locks that into memory, and then that allows it to kind of play around the edges. It can mutate, change, develop new functionalities that it can in turn lock into memory, like a ratchet. You kind of save your place, and you don't have to go backwards every time. So anyway, this is why life is complex. There's all these interacting pieces that are coupled together, and to pull one out and try to understand the whole is fundamentally impossible. And that is essentially why we have invented the field of systems biology.